In this lesson, we are discussing the intercultural communication. In an increasingly globalized economy, more and more companies have relationships with other countries. When writing emails for international readers and trying to communicate across cultural barriers, you may want to prepare for the challenge of the following. Hierarchy. The hierarchy culture. This culture is founded on structure and control. The work environment is formal, with strict institutional procedures in place for guidance. Leadership is based on organized coordination and monitoring, with a culture emphasizing efficiency and predictability. Relationships. Business dealing in the United States tend to be direct and move at an efficient pace. In contrast, in some countries, it may move a little more slowly. Relationships play an important and valuable role throughout these cultures, and the business sector is no exception to this rule. A phrase used to describe the culture is, "We negotiate with people, not companies." It is important to invest the time getting to know your potential business partner and contacts, and building personal relationship with them. Direct or indirect. What is the best way to communicate with others? In cultures with a direct communication style, which tend to correlate with a task-oriented culture, both literal truthfulness as well as efficiency in communication are highly valued and to some extent are a higher priority than personal or political sensitivity, especially in a business setting. Saying no or I don't know is considered both honest and respectful of the party. Problems are felt to be solved more rapidly if open and frank discussion is encouraged. In indirect cultures, on the other hand, direct communication, negative information is seen as impolite and crude, even in a business setting. In these situations, polite excuses or evasions, which both parties usually know and recognize as such, are given, and in extreme cases, even outright fictions are invented. Again, with the recognition by both parties that a diplomatic strategy is being employed. Problems are felt to be solved more productively if they are handled with tact and discretion. Then talk about time. The time orientation of a culture affects how it values time and control time. Therefore, different concepts of time and its management across cultures are a significant problem in global communications. Each culture has its own perspective of time. Meeting deadlines and management project workflows when working with people from different nationalities across the world can be one of the most challenging aspects of management intercultural business relationships. Culturally different attitudes to time management can be extremely harmful in multinational communications. Talk about group. An individualist is motivated by personal rewards and benefits. Individualist persons set personal goals and objectives based on self. Individualistic workers are very comfortable working with autonomy and not part of a team. The collectivist is motivated by group goals. Long-term relationships are very important. Collectivistic persons easily sacrifice individual benefits or praise to recognize and honor the team's success. In fact, being singled out and honored as an individual from the rest of the team may be embarrassing to the collectivistic person. Then what is face? Face is a term used and represents a metaphor for reputation, similar to the saying saving face. In some countries, reputation and social standing is extremely important, and businessmen are incredibly conscious about face. It is critical to avoid doing something which results in loss of face. Understanding face can be difficult, as quite effectively is the level of respect you have. The different factors that influence it can depend on more than your own actions. What must be understood is that in these countries, hierarchies of status are very important, which ties in the role of faith. Okay, then let's see some email examples one by one. This is an example showing the hierarchy in Japanese culture. A low-level staff wrote an email to his director. You can see how humble this writer is. He appreciates a lot his boss. This is an example showing the relationships in Brazilian culture. A businessman is approaching someone who he met in a conference. In order to build business relationship, he mentioned his team leader was coming from the same school as the reader. It shows the relationship is important in business making in a cultural environment such as Brazil. This is an example of a typical American team leader sending email to team members for project activities update. Simple and efficient, without any extra words and related to project itself. This is an example of a German reply to someone about a project plan. No redundant words, just a very detailed project plan with timeline and activities. Besides the project plan, he also mentioned the deadline and the date of latest to make decision. This is an example of an Indian team leader sending email to a new foreign, should be a Westerner team member, about a potential culture difference regarding to individual and the group colleague relationship. This is an example of a Chinese middle management sending an email about the bad news of key staff quit his job owing to losing faith in the team. She also reminded management about how faith is so important in Chinese society. Then we talk about how to write for intercultural audience. First is care appropriate tone and the level of formality. The number one is about formal. A Japanese or Spanish business person will expect business email to have a very formal tone. In a business email, he'll expect you to address him with his title, full name, and appropriate hieroglyphics. Even if you consider him a long-time friend, if you begin with "Hi, Taro," and jump straight to a sales pitch, he is likely to feel disrespected. A French reader will expect some subtlety, flourish, and interaction in a business email. The usual American get to the point fast and say it bluntly. Approach may strike him as crude and unsophisticated. British readers often find American sales pitch overly optimistic, simplistic, and boastful. They prefer a more realistic, modest, understated approach. And hard sell in a business solicitation is considered rude in Finland. Indeed, much of the world prefers a less blunt, more subtle tone in their business communication than is common in the US. Then we talk about the approach in a way that meets your reader's expectations. In the US and much of Western Europe, most business readers want you to state the point of your email immediately. That approach doesn't work in many parts of the world, where establishing a more human relationship with the reader first is important. A business email in Japan, for example, is likely to begin with a reference to the seasons, like "We are having a beautiful spring here in San Francisco. I hope you are enjoying the cherry blossoms in Tokyo." And introducing yourself business data in Brazil is likely to begin with a reference to family, like "We recently traveled to Rio de Janeiro with my wife. Your country is beautiful. We enjoy the beach immensely." Or to a mutual acquaintances, "I enjoy meeting with your product director, Tanok Maduro, at last week's leading lighting conference in Las Vegas." In Russia and many countries of the Middle East, readers expect business communication to begin with talk about the mutual acquaintances or common personal histories in some way. Trusting the writer comes before trusting the email. In many countries, you should treat your international readers as simply fellow human beings and will be friends before you address them as business target. Then, very importantly, always remind yourself your readers' cultural values. First, it's about group or individual goals. In many Asian countries like Japan, China, and Korea, for example, the welfare of the group or community as a whole comes before the desire of the individual. In the United States and some Western European countries, on the other hand, individual goals may come first. Thus, if you are trying to sell a new business plan in Asia, you might stress how it will help the company succeed as a whole and add to the prosperity of the company's home city. In the US or England, you would be more likely to stress how it could lead to higher wages and greater job performance for each worker. Then it's about faith and hierarchy. For example, in Japan, China, Brazil, and many other countries, it is important for everyone to save face and avoid being shamed. Thus, if you need to write a letter to someone in those countries complaining about the product, avoid suggesting that anyone is to blame, lest they lose face and feel embarrassed. You may instead to make excuses for the problem, like blame bad weather or a miscommunication. Likewise, failure to use the appropriate title for a reader or to acknowledge the reader's place in the corporate hierarchy can offend readers in many nations where hierarchies are important. Finally, we talk about to meet requirements for different cultures. Examples like how detailed should be when you give operational instructions for a product. In countries like Germany and the United States, instructions, for example, tend to include a great deal of detail, listing and showing each tool needed, each part provided, and each small direction to be followed. In countries like Japan and China, the direction might tend simple. Readers in those countries may find super detailed instructions insulting to their intelligence. The other example is car sales materials. You may stress safety and reliability in the United States and Germany, whereas in France, it stresses social status and leisure. Okay, then what's next? We are introducing high and low context communication.